Imagine you're little Timmy or just some new consumer who is about to enter the PC hardware and gaming market. You don't have a lot of disposable income, but you worked hard and you've saved a lot over the years. You've heard a lot of great things about the gaming PC platform, the visuals, performance, and the freedom that this platform has to offer. And you often hear your friends talking about it in a wide variety of ways, all the games they play and all of the experiences that they have. And you did some research and found out that there were amazing GPUs which were released to consumers like the GTX 750 Ti and the RX 480, which were sold at price points that didn't leave a gaping hole in your wallet, but still offered you a thrilling and satisfactory experience, which makes you quite optimistic about how much you really need to spend to get a good experience. You head down over to your local computer parts store, you find that for just $250, your only option is a GPU with 8 gigabytes of VRAM, the same amount that was offered by cards nearly a decade ago and which were sold for $200, and it struggles to run the latest games, and you need to use upscaling as well. And it may not even run them at all. That's the worst part. The solution, come back with at least double your budget so you don't run into those issues, and even then you still kind of feel like you're getting ripped off. So then you need to come back with at least 3 times your budget to get that experience, that amazing experience that your friends raved about. Is this really where we're at in the PC gaming market? Then I guess so.
Today's video is sponsored by Maono, featuring their incredible PD300X dynamic microphone. Whether you're streaming, podcasting, or creating YouTube content like myself, audio quality definitely matters, and the PD300X delivers exactly that. What makes this microphone truly versatile is its dual connectivity. It supports both USB-C and XLR outputs, giving you professional level audio whether you're recording at home or in a studio. The robust metal construction not only feels premium, but also ensures excellent durability. But where the PD300X really shines is its advanced audio controls. With Maono's intuitive Link app, you can effortlessly control everything from mic gain, headphone volume, real-time monitoring, to advanced EQ settings and noise suppression, all accessible in one streamlined interface. This means crystal clear audio that's tailored exactly to your voice and environment without any hassle. Setup is incredibly simple. Plug and play via USB means you'll be ready to record and stream instantly. If you're looking to set up your audio game even further, the XLR connection opens doors to professional-grade audio interfaces and mixers. I've personally found the Maono PD300X microphone to be an absolute game-changer for my content, providing crisp and vibrant sound because it provides a 192 kHz 24-bit sample rate that's easy to control and customize. If you're serious about content creation and want fantastic audio quality without breaking the bank, check out Maono's PD300X and the Maono Link app today. Check the link in the description down below.
Average frame rate performance was 46% greater on the 16GB model, and then secondly, frame time performance falls off a cliff, tanking down to a 1% low of 1 FPS.
Now, Indiana Jones is an interesting one because it scored precisely 0. Not because it performed so badly, but because it simply didn't run. For anyone who's played the game, you'll know that the menu forms part of the game, and well, with this card, we couldn't even get into it.
And I've never seen any cards just crash while I've been benchmarking this game. But sure enough, the 5060 decided it was going to do something that no other card has done, and it was just going to completely close my game while I'm benchmarking.
That card, and in this particular game, the downgrades are very noticeable. Anyway, I just find it amazing that anyone can defend this. It's pretty mind-blowing stuff, given the 16GB model is not only offering highly playable performance here, but it's also 883% faster when using the same PCIe 3.0 configuration.
25 performance mode equivalent settings, fine I'd say for a $300 GPU, shows the plus and minus points. You get the stratospheric improvements to frame rate, but there is a latency penalty, anything up to 25 milliseconds for 4x MFG. But you'll note that on this lower end GPU, the latency increase between 2x to 4x MFG is notable, more notable than it is when using the same technology on higher end cards.
I really needed to include that. You guys are gonna have to bear with me. I'm still recovering from this bronchitis. I don't know how I caught it in the summer, but it is what it is. I'll tell you guys why I felt like including this, and it's because I've gotten so damn tired of all the apologists or the complacency where people are like, it's an 8GB card, just run it at low and medium settings, turn on DLSS, turn on frame generation, bro. Except we've had cards from nearly a decade ago with 8GB of VRAM or even less than that selling for around $150 to $250 and having no problems with running games from that era with high or ultra settings. And back then, upscaling wasn't even a thing. So what you got was a true native resolution rendering experience. Goes to show you that either the true mainstream has shifted up so dramatically where consumers need like 3x their budget, or they're completely priced out and have to settle for solutions that can't even deliver what this segment was known for. Hey, what is going on, guys? Danny here. Welcome back to the channel, and I hope you've all been doing well. There's been a lot that's happened over the past few weeks in the PC gaming and hardware market. Most notably, we got a new GPU that Nvidia released, which targeted the mainstream buyer. And while I would say that, mainstream or budget consumers should rejoice, it's not really feasible for me to say that, considering what you get pales in comparison to the awesome bang for buck options we used to have a few years back. Hence the inclusion of those clips in the beginning of the video. I was originally prompted on, making this video because every now and then I'll make these market update videos where I'll look at different segments, retail listings, and, give a recommendation on what graphics card you should buy depending on that budget. And last time I made a video like this was all the way back in May of 2023. So it's been a while, but then I looked at what was actually available and started going through the listings, and I got totally derailed off my original idea because when I realized that the entry level was getting absolutely fleeced, I ended up making this video, and here I am going to highlight why buying a new GPU in 2025 for the masses feels like a sick joke. The RTX 5050 has an MSRP of $250 US, and at the time of making this video, if you go onto newegg.com, you can't even actually buy this card, which may just be a blessing in disguise. And just like the RTX 5060 and the 5060 Ti 8GB, Nvidia didn't sample this GPU to the PC tech media, probably because they knew they were just going to get absolutely shat on by reviewers. I was taking a look at some benchmarks, and Tech Power posted their review of this card and found that at 1080p it attained an average of about 72 FPS, which I guess in a vacuum, it's fine. But don't even bother with 1440p, let alone 4K. The card just doesn't have the horsepower and video memory to handle those resolutions. But when you compare this card to GPUs like the RTX 4060 or even the 3060 from 2 generations ago, it actually looks quite pathetic. And those cards were selling for around $300, so you could have already purchased this level of performance, if not even more, ages ago. Ideally, if you're someone who's looking to get a solid experience at 1080p and 1440p with minimal compromises, then you'd have to jump to something like an RTX 5060 Ti 16GB, which in my opinion is what the 5060 originally should have been. But hey, Nvidia is just going to keep on raising that floor up and maximize their margins, right? Now, I was taking a look online, and the cheapest RTX 5060 Ti 16GB I could find on Amazon.com was $450. So in order to get to that acceptable standard or adequate level of performance for modern games, an individual who we were talking about at the beginning of the video would need to extend their budget by like another 80%. And that's just not always feasible, right? And even then, comparing how capable the previous Gen 60 class was prior to the 4060s, that is, you'd still feel like you're not getting such a great deal, because remember, it wasn't that long ago where whatever the latest 60 class card was offering the 80 class performance from the previous generation. Now you're looking at 5070 Ti class, if you want the previous generation 80 class performance, which means paying $750 US if you're lucky to find one at MSRP, or most often enough, they're going for around $850 to $900. Another alternative route you can go is obviously AMD. The RX 9060 XT 16GB on Amazon is going for around $360, which is almost $100 cheaper than the cheapest RTX 5060 Ti 16GB that we looked at earlier. And I would personally forego having access to those Nvidia features, if I was in that segment, and take the card with 16 gigabytes of VRAM over, say, a $300 or $380 5060 8GB or 5060 Ti 8GB respectively, or even if they're, similarly priced, right? Because in this day and age, I just can't really recommend buying an 8GB graphics card where you have to face making compromises, running at medium settings at 1080p, use upscaling, heavy upscaling that is, or even frame generation in order to attain that playable experience. I have no problem with suggesting to someone using an older card to do that, like if they're using, an RTX 2070, 3070, because those are 5+ year old GPUs at this point. You're going to have to face reality that your card is going to be aged and it's not going to be able to perform as good as it once did. But the point here and why I included those clips in the beginning is because when you're buying or paying for a mainstream GPU in 2025, you should be able to play comfortably on 1080p with high or ultra settings and attain 60+ FPS with, little to no stutters. Not that this is a new graphics card, but you're going to have to play at 1080p medium with upscaling and, force frame generation down your throat. But like we've discussed in the past, manufacturers, or in the manufacturer's eyes, part of that deal or the overall deal is you're supposed to be turning on frame generation along with DLSS upscaling in order to fully attain that whole performance improvement that they're advertising to you. That's why, you look at these official press slides or the release slides from the marketing team from Nvidia for the RTX 5060 or the 5050 that is. And the majority of those in-house benchmarks that they're showing in their marketing slides is with frame generation or multi-frame generation in X4 mode turned on versus the older outgoing part, which in this case was the 3050. They didn't make a 4050, remember that. But because, to the untrained eye, when you look at those slides, it looks like you're getting a gargantuous upgrade because the 3050 cannot do any sort of frame generation at all. Whereas on the new 5050, you can go all the way up to, X4. So you can go all the way from 50 FPS all the way to 200. But again, with frame generation, it's not like it's true performance. It's a frame smoothing technology. I always like to make that distinction. What's ironic, though, is that if you've ever used upscaling and even frame generation at lower resolutions and at lower frame rates, it can look like a complete mess. The artifacting, the shimmering, it's very, very easy to notice. And what's even worse, in my opinion, is the input lag. Like, I can sometimes deal with, imperfections of the image, whatever, here and there. I'll ignore that. But what I can't deal with is when I'm pressing a button in input and it feels like I have to wait a second for it to actually register in my video game. That is very, very jarring for me. So in Nvidia and, also even AMD to an extent, they're trying to push this massive upgrade with AI, but they're only telling you half the story here. And again, these features are more viable with higher end cards because, not to mention, they also use more VRAM. So on an 8GB graphics card, you're not going to be able to use it. Along with that, like I was saying earlier, these lower end cards, you're going to have a lower base frame rate. So when you add frame generation on top of a low base frame rate, it's very, very jarring. So it just does not work out properly. But circling back to AMD, they do also have their own set of software features, including upscaling. And now they have FSR4, which, looks very, very good compared to FSR3. It looks almost as good as a DLSS 4 in some cases. And they do also have their own frame generation. So it's not like you can't enjoy those types of features if you really want to, if you decide to go AMD. And so with the way the market is in its current state, then for mainstream buyers, if you really want to go new, the RX 9060 XT 16GB is definitely offering the best value amongst a whole pack of the new GPUs from this $250 to $450 segment. It just doesn't sit well with me to suggest, an 8GB card in 2025, unless it's dirt cheap, like below $150, which obviously is not the case, or that person tells me, I do not care about new games or AAA games. All I'm playing is older games, so like pre-2020 or all I do is play esports or Twitch titles like, I don't know, Rocket League, Counter-Strike, League of Legends, etc. Because those games, yeah, sure, 8 gigabytes is fine, but there are also much cheaper alternatives, and we'll look at that in a moment if that is all you want to do. But I just feel like buying those 8 gigabyte cards now, those users are going to find themselves upgrading much sooner than they expect. What's also off-putting here is how the manufacturers have gimped these cards with an X8 PCIe 5.0 interface. And considering that the target demographic for these cards is on a stricter budget, perhaps they're using an older motherboard, a used motherboard, or last generation stuff that doesn't support PCIe 5.0, then they're also going to have to face the fact that performance could be severely hampered when using PCIe 5.0 X8, an X8 card that is, on a motherboard that only supports PCIe 5.0, or even worse, 3.0, because that compounds. Hardware Unboxed on YouTube has made a couple of good videos demonstrating these limitations, so I do definitely recommend checking those videos out. Now, there is another viable alternative route that you can take, but this is highly dependent on the region you're in, and if you're really strapped for cash, and that is searching the used market. For around $200, I've seen eBay listings for RTX 2080s, and I actually did a revisit of this graphics card earlier this year and found that, with the right settings, it can still play modern games. It supports Nvidia's DLSS 4 transformer model, though not the frame generation tech. However, you can also use AMD's FSR frame generation if you want to, but you can use those technologies to kind of help alleviate poor performance issues. Like I said, I have no problem recommending that on old aged hardware. But the 2080 is a pretty decent value card. I even saw Newegg selling refurbished ones for around $230 if you want to deal with an actual retailer with a bit of warranty rather than a private third-party seller. I've even seen RTX 2080 Ti sell for around $300, and these are also very, very good graphics cards. They come with 11 gigabytes of VRAM, and performance is around a 3070 Ti, and these won't run into the PCIe limitations. In other words, they're going to be blowing the RTX 5050, 5060, and 9068 gigabyte out of the water. The only downsides are that they are used cards, right? So you're going to have to do a bit of work to ensure that you get a working GPU that's in good condition, and power consumption will be notably higher on these older graphics cards. Though on a desktop environment, I'm not sure how much that may really even matter to you. I've even seen RTX 3080 10GB models go for around $350, and from the benchmarks that I've seen from reviewers out there, they found that it'll still be ahead of even the RTX 5060 Ti 16GB, which, as we just saw, goes for around $450 plus. And, it might have that VRAM limitation, sure, but like I said earlier, for a 5-year-old graphics card, I'm sure most won't object to lowering down settings a notch. Now, here's another recommendation. Let's say you're looking for a solid bang for the buck graphics card, around $150, and you're amongst that old school crowd or that budget esports crowd, then I would suggest looking at a used 1080 Ti. You can find these for around $150 on eBay, and the card is still very capable. You just won't be able to utilize stuff like DLSS and ray tracing and frame generation, but I think people picking this card up probably won't even care that much. And I know Nvidia has dropped official support for it, official driver support that is, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the card just won't work. Techwando, a good friend of the channel, he actually did a revisit of the Titan X Pascal earlier this year, which is basically a 12GB 1080 Ti, and found that for modern games with reasonable settings, it still slaps. So overall, it is very, very good value. I did also want to point out that this is going to be highly region dependent. In North America, and especially in the States, it doesn't feel like it's impossible to find decent deals on used parts, but there could be a region where they're still selling old parts for near MSRP. And the other thing to be worried about is because the new GPU options are just so underwhelming, old parts are actually keeping their value higher for a longer period of time. I remember looking at RTX 3080s 2 years ago, and they were selling for around $350 to $400. And then guess what? 2 years later, they're still going for that on the used market. Old parts, yeah, they are very much keeping their value for a much longer period of time. It's not like the old days where, all of a sudden a GTX 980 loses half of its value because you'd be better off buying a brand new GTX 1060 for like $250. Look at used RTX 4070 Supers. They're still going for like $550 or $500 at the minimum because the 5070 or whatever, it's not that much more better than its predecessors. moving along, and this is going to actually restore some of your faith in humanity, and that is that gamers are actually clearly rejecting the 8GB cards. Tech Power Up reported that they looked through some sales data from a German retailer called Mind Factory, and they're a pretty big PC parts retailer there, and they found that the RTX 5060 Ti 16GB outsold the 8GB model by a whopping 16-to-1 ratio. Now, to be fair, the choice isn't that hard. I mean, for $50 more, if you can double your VRAM amount, I'm sure most people will take that route, and this is a clear upsell strategy that was set up from Nvidia by the start. I mean, you'd be an idiot not to do that in this day and age. Gamers Nexus also noted in a previous video they posted discussing sales data from American retailers like Best Buy, Amazon, and Newegg, and found that 8GB cards are just not moving as much as their 16GB counterparts. I also ran a poll on my channel asking if, you had a friend building their first PC on a very limited budget and the max that they could spend was $300, what would they recommend? And, the vast majority suggested that they would look at the used market, and many suggested in the comments that they'd even spot their friends some money so they could get a 16GB card and not have to go through that nightmare. And to you guys, you're absolute gigachads. The reason why I'm focusing on this mainstream or budget segment a lot here is because this is where the vast majority of the PC gaming user base resides in. Take a look at the Steam hardware survey for June 2025. The top 10 spots are dominated by 50 and 60 class GPUs, with some spots taken by previous generation 70 class GPUs. Before the pricing went crazy, that is. If you look at the top 10 bestsellers on the graphics card category over on a place like Amazon.com, you'll see that a lot of the SKUs are Nvidia 60 class or the competing AMD part like the RX 9060 XT. And in a time where the global economy looks like we're in a recession or approaching one, then people are going to be a lot more frugal with their disposable income. And these types of entry-level cards are all that they can afford or that are going to be more appealing to them. In case you're wondering why everything aside from the high-end enthusiast cards feels so underwhelming, that's because manufacturers like Nvidia and AMD have been gradually giving you less for your money. And this chart in particular, something we've looked at in the past, sums it up perfectly. While 8GB VRAM limitations are one thing, you can also see the degradation in the amount of GPU cores you're getting compared to the previous generation. Soon we're going to be seeing 5070 Ti's only have like a 20% die of the flagship relative to the flagship at this rate. Beyond individual frustrations, there is a bigger concern here. If this trajectory continues, there is a real risk of PC gaming becoming inaccessible, especially for newcomers. High prices and disappointing performance may push gamers towards more predictable and affordable experiences like consoles or perhaps gaming handheld PCs like the Steam Deck. This was something I actually used to speculate with a friend of mine back in the day when, as we saw the floor for entry-level GPUs keep rising, are the entry-level gamers going to have to look towards APUs or SoCs as for their, solutions? I mean, it could very well be a thing where people have to settle with this and be okay with it. Just look at how large the handheld market has become with options from the Steam Deck, the Asus ROG Ally, Lenovo Legion Go, MSI Claw, and even Microsoft crashing the party now. These devices offer portability, predictable and stable performance, and crucially, an accessible price that might soon turn them into mainstream solutions for anyone feeling priced out of the desktop GPU shrinkflation. So, what started off as a video project that was supposed to be more of a recommendations list quickly turned into something much bigger as a deep dive into just how rough things have gotten for the entry-level and mainstream GPU segments. The more I looked into it, the more I realized just how far we've strayed away from what used to be, reliable, accessible parts for the PC gaming space that didn't break the bank. And right now, in the present, I just can't recommend these parts. At the end of the day, the market situation won't drastically shift until, genuine competition emerges or manufacturers recognize that the mainstream segment actually deserves better. But until then, my best advice remains focus solely on what gives you the best value personally. Supporting one brand over another really doesn't accomplish anything for anyone. Just choose what's truly best for your budget and your gaming needs, even if you have to look at the used or refurbished market. And don't be afraid of that because you can find some gems out there. But that's going to be wrapping it up for this one. I hope you guys were able to bear with my voice. That's just been horsey. But yeah, that's going to do it for this one, and we'll touch base in the next video. Peace.
If you guys found this video to be informative and entertaining, then leave a like. Let me know your thoughts and comments down below. Be sure to check out the video description for cool links and ways to support the channel, such as using my Amazon affiliate link. And if you're interested in seeing more content like this, then consider subscribing, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.